All right, according to Wikipedia, my guest this week is either the former king of Mesopotamia or a YouTuber not afraid to speak his mind on controversial topics. That's right, I have Karl Benjamin, better known as Sargon of Akkad, on the show. Karl, Sargon, what do I call you?
Whichever you want. I get called both all day long, so whichever one you're comfortable with, honestly.
Sargon has sort of overtaken Karl. There's sort of a Batman Bruce Wayne situation here, right?
You know, there kind of is, actually. Yeah, the name Sargon has definitely traveled before me in many places where progressives tend to congregate.
You said progressives. I'm shocked that you didn't say regressives, but we'll get to that momentarily. So before we get into all the deep stuff and the topics and the meat of this, I want people to get to know you a little bit, because I think it's sort of just recently that you're showing your face more, you're out there more, your name's getting out there a little bit more. So how did Karl Benjamin become Sargon of Akkad?
That's an interesting story. It's not actually that interesting at all. Now I say that.
Well, just make it interesting. How about that?
I'll try and fabricate something. No, basically about 2.5 years ago, you know when you're on the internet, you end up just choosing a moniker that you sign into places with. And I just happened to like the historical figure of Sargon of Akkad. He was an interesting figure. I liked the sound of the name, and so I was just using that. And I had signed up to YouTube in 2010 just to upload some videos of myself with an ancient sling. You know, the sort of I made one according to historical sort of documents, and I tested it out, and it's you can see why they were dangerous weapons, sort of thing. And then a few years later, I was basically getting really, really worried about the sort of political climate in the left. I was starting to see more and more often. Just my own principles being completely violated. And it was really, really, really worrying. And it was the sort of thing that was genuinely starting to gnaw at me, because, I mean, I would see people arguing against people's freedom of speech, or they would be arguing against a meritocratic system or something like that. And everyone would seem to be going along with it. This was, there were so many people going, yeah, that's exactly how we should do things. And I was starting to panic, thinking, well, Christ, I totally disagree. In fact, I disagree on such a fundamental level, I have to say something. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself just motivated, sort of write, just like, I don't know, 5-minute scripts or something, and then read them with a very, very bad microphone. Then, I mean, it's
all about the mic.
It really is. It's a magician's trick almost. I had just the cheapo microphone. It was really, really terrible quality. Mm-hmm. And I'd read these ideas, and they started gaining some views, and people started subscribing to my channel and stuff. And looking back now, I'm thinking, God, there was a lot of forbearance there about my technical skill and what I was saying. But I guess some people agreed with what I was saying, because now I've got I've just passed quarter of 1,000,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And now I do this full time, and it's a wonderful thing to be doing. Is fighting for my principles professionally.
So I love that. I love that because, as I say on the show every week, what I'm trying to do here is make this about ideas. And that's really what you were talking about. You were hearing bad ideas, and then you wanted to beat them with better ideas. And clearly it's working, because you got over 250,000 subscribers. And when I had my personal awakening, because everyone knows at this point, I've always considered myself liberal. Then I was in the progressive world, which I now see as some sort of mental disorder. But when I was having my awakening out of that, everyone online said to me, "You've got to talk to Sargon." So my first question to you, before we get into the heavy stuff, is: did you study politics? What brought you into the political realm?
I didn't. It was just watching the news, I guess, and just watching popular. I mean, I used to be a big fan of the Young Turks. I used to consider myself progressive until I met progressives, and like you said, I couldn't believe the things they were saying. It really struck me as some sort of mental disorder.
Yeah.
Why would they start saying things like this? And yeah, and then I found myself sort of floundering on my own, because I'm not a conservative. I can't bring myself to subscribe to conservative ideals. They just don't work for me. I don't believe in them. And so I was basically on my own. Everyone I knew who was a liberal was quite happy to ignore the foundational principles of liberalism in order to in order to push progressivism further, and the more I've learned about progressivism, the more I realize it's really used liberalism as a Trojan horse. To, they've said, oh, we're liberals, we're progressives, and I mean, on the surface of it, they're not necessarily arguing for different things. It's really the methods that are the problem. It's not necessarily the goals. But yeah, they happily use the terms interchangeably, and they are not interchangeable at all.
Yeah, so let's unpack that a little bit. So I've heard you say that you refer to yourself as a classic liberal. And the more that I've been doing this, I mean, that's really where I feel at home too. I think now I have some really strong libertarian leanings also, but there's some play there. There's some common ground there. But what does classic liberalism mean to you?
Well, it's just the basic Enlightenment values that came out of the Enlightenment. The civil liberties, political freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of association, economic freedom, representative democracy, the rule of law. It's all these just. There is no argument against these ideas. These are great ideas. They're universal ideas. Everyone is protected under these ideas. Unlike with progressivism, where the first thing they will do is demarcate a group. And they will say, right, women, black people, gay people, these people need special treatment. And that special treatment will involve the infringement of your personal rights. And that is where I have a problem, because if we all ascribe to the same rights, A, we're all being treated as equals. B, nobody ends up losing their rights. And I don't have a point C, but I wish I did. I think I've covered it, all the reasons.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So this is sort of an example of the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Yes. Because this is where I know a lot of progressives. A lot of them won't talk to me anymore. People that were my good friends only 6-8 months ago that won't talk to me anymore. But I believe that for the most part, and we're going to get into some of the really dangerous ones, but I think for the most part, people that consider themselves progressive, most of the people that are going to Bernie Sanders rallies, I think are good people. I think their intentions are correct. So we're really talking about the methodology here, right?
Yeah, there are a few. The problem is you have a bunch of. You have a bunch of motivating factors that kind of coalesce, and mixed in with that, you have the more sort of pernicious aspects of people who can see where this is going, because a lot of it involves giving the benefit of the doubt to people who you would otherwise necessarily be skeptical to. People for example, rape laws. One of the big progressive pushes is to have it so that the victim, quote unquote, the alleged victim is believed, and therefore the burden of proof becomes laid on the person who's being accused rather than on the accuser. And they do this via the use of statistics. They say, oh, well, I can't remember what the number is, but something like, 5% of accused rapists go to jail or something like that. And therefore, they assume that there is a massive problem with the system, that 95% of accused rapists are also actual rapists, and therefore are just being let off through a bad system. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, A, we don't know that. We have no idea how many of the people who are accused are actually illegitimate rapists and deserve to be condemned for it and convicted for it. But secondly, what we're doing there is reversing the system, because at the moment what we have is a system that isn't perfect, but can deliver justice in a reliable way. We can be quite sure that the people going to jail probably aren't innocent. We've been through a rigorous trial. The burden of proof is on the accuser. They've managed to prove beyond reasonable doubt. And, that's fine, because that way you're going to get the minimum number of people who didn't do anything wrong being punished as if they did something wrong. Whereas to flip the script on that would mean that you now have a system that is inherently unjust, that might be able to deliver justice on occasion. The occasion being the person being accused is on camera somewhere else at the time that they're supposed to have been doing the rape or something like that,
Right.
It's that sort of thing. It would be incidental justice. You couldn't rely on it, because you don't presume the innocence of the people being accused. The guilt is being presumed, and it's being done, like you say, out of good motives. The idea that, we don't want to call the victims liars. And it's like, no, I don't want to call the victim a liar either. But it's one of those points where you're on the horns of a dilemma and you have no choice but to take a responsible course of action for the safety of someone who hasn't done anything wrong.
Right. So, all right. So there's a lot there that I want to...
Yeah, sorry. I know I've got... I've been preparing for this.
Yeah. No, you're jumping. I knew that that's how this conversation was going to go because there's so much to talk about, and these things are always inextricably linked. That's what I've found whenever I'm talking about anything related to sort of regressive ideology, and then when you start talking about feminism and Islamism and all these things, they're all so inextricably linked. So let's jump into Gamergate for a second, and then we'll get back to some of that stuff, because Gamergate, I think, is one of the things that really sort of put you on the map. And even by saying the word Gamergate, I've made people crazy. We know this. Now, I've discussed it with a couple people. I've had Milo Yiannopoulos on. I've talked about it with Christina Hoff Sommers. But you yourself, you are a true gamer, correct?
Yes, I am indeed a true gamer.
What are you playing these days?
I play a game called Ark Survival Evolved most. I actually have my own server where I pay for a server where I get to run around killing virtual dinosaurs. It's great.
Wow. Well, thank you for taking a moment from slaying dinosaurs to join me here. But yeah, you've really been in the Gamergate thing, and I think you're considered sort of an expert on it. So can you give me like a 2-3 minute explanation of what Gamergate is? And I know that's almost impossible because it seems like it's something different to everybody.
It is. I can give you my version of what it is. But like you say, it is different to everybody. And you're going to get people who are going to say that's not what Gamergate is and whatnot. So for me, it's a very definite reaction to regressives infiltrating the video game media. Now, this is something that we saw happening over the course of about 5 years, where they were just larger and larger numbers of them would be hired at various gaming publications, and then they would start writing articles like, are these video games sexist? Why are these video games misogynist? There are no trans people in these video games. This is racist. This is, the standard regressive lines.
Yeah, 101.
And they would be promoting very famous feminists like Anita Sarkeesian or Zoe Quinn, people with, and I don't want to sound mean, but very few real credentials in the video game industry. I mean, like Zoe Quinn, the Franz Ferdinand of Gamergate, she made a free. Did you ever have those choose your own adventure books?
I love choose your own adventure. I probably had every one of them.
Right?
Yeah.
And basically that's what she had made. She had made a digital choose your own adventure book. It was all text, nothing else in it. It can't have taken very long, but it was about learning to deal with depression. And I've never had depression, so I can't judge the game on that merit. So on that, I'm sure it's very good. But your average gamer, this wasn't really a game. It wasn't a fail state. There wasn't really anything you could play. It was more like an interactive novel, which is, again, it's in itself fine. But the gaming press, because she was a prominent feminist and regressive, she got unbelievable amounts of coverage. And I mean, when I say unbelievable amounts, I mean any amount of coverage for this.
Yeah.
Is more than you would expect. And so people they were getting sick of the agenda being pushed on them. And it's the same with Anita Sarkeesian. When Anita Sarkeesian did her Kickstarter, it was everywhere. Everyone knew about it. And yet everyone also knew that the arguments she was presenting were half-truths. They were cherry-picked. She was finding individual examples that didn't really represent the gaming industry or any even subsections of the gaming industry, and presenting them as if they were a categoric statement on the condition of the entire gaming industry. And so everyone was really kind of annoyed by this point, especially as the way that these people work is by riling up your emotions. So almost everything they say is fundamentally accusatory. They would say things like, you're a sexist, you're a racist, if you like these games. There aren't enough black people in this game, there aren't enough women in this game, there aren't enough gay people, all this sort of thing. And if you're enjoying it, you're a bad person. Whereas most people are thinking, well, just make the games you want to make, right? But no, that's not what these people are interested in whatsoever. And so it got to the point where Zoe Quinn was caught having an affair with her boss, who was involved in video games, and also a journalist called Nathan Grayson. And the video game industry's press has always been corrupt. I mean, it's always been corrupt. It's come out of a hobby press. It's always been really, really bad. But this was
when you say corrupt, just to pause for 1 sec, when you say corrupt, I mean things like, people paying off the magazine writers so that they'd get better reviews on the game, so they'd sell more games. I mean, real corrupt stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it's in your face as well. You go to a video game sort of online magazine, and the backdrop would be the advertisement for a game that then would be reviewed in the center column. It's not even, they're not even trying to hide it. But for the most part, nobody really cared because they weren't being preachy about it. You know, they were trying to sell you video games, and that's what people were there for. So therefore, nobody was really that bothered. But then the regressives turned up and started being corrupt in a whole different way. Instead of being motivated by money, which I suppose is to their credit, they were motivated by ideology. And so now they would hire people into positions and promote things that were all based on cronyism. It was all their friends and family members and whatnot. They would push everything to do with their agenda, and people had just been really, really sick of it. And they were tired of this faux moralism, tired of being told that they were bad people, even though obviously none of these people are actually bad people. You know, nobody knows who all of these people are, and yeah, they're being prejudged before anything happens. And it got to the point where people were like, look, no, enough. You know, this has got to stop. And that's what that was basically. It was called the Quinspiracy to start with. And then the video game press, instead of turning around and saying something like, okay, fair enough, we haven't been doing our due diligence. You know, a lot of them are professional trained journalists, like Stephen Totilo from Kotaku. He has a master's degree in journalism, and he's there saying, well, do we have to be objective? What's the need for objective journalism? And so you can instantly see the problems that were inherent in the video game industry.
Yeah, and I know we can really go down the rabbit hole with this, and we could spend 3 hours with this, but I think that's a nice little beginning piece of it. But what I really find fascinating about it, and why I've brought it up several times, is because the same things that you're talking about, how the regressives sort of infiltrated this and turned something that had nothing to do with sexism or racism or any of these things, they made it about that. And I think when I was on your show, I was saying how I used to be a huge gamer. I'm not that much anymore, but I like the community and I do play some games here and there. But I played Grand Theft Auto, and yeah, you could steal a car and punch a hooker, and people would say, well, that's against women, but you could also punch a man. So should they only have it that you'd only punch men? I mean, even the logic behind it doesn't really stand to critique.
And there's no winning either. This is the point. It's all what's called a Kafka trap. It's either you are this thing or you're this thing, you don't even realize it. You know, and there's no falsifiability to any of their hypotheses. But the main problem, I mean, if you think about it like with Grand Theft Auto, so like what are the options? Not include women in the game. No way. They'd freak out if you couldn't put women in the game.
Right. Or
you can have the women not being able to be treated like men. Again, they'd be freaking out. That's not equal at all. So, what are you going to have? You're going to have women so that they just can't be damaged, or they will not allow you to treat women like men. You know, you can't beat up women. But you can beat up men. And so you're in this position where you've got no win. You know, there's no good answer, and that's how they want it. They want you dancing to their tune.
Yeah.
Know?
And that's what's so fascinating about this, and why I think it's so related to the political situation with the regressives. And I also think that's why Gamergate blew up the way it did, because gamers generally are going to skew a little younger than the people that are solely interested in politics. So because of that, I think it was this group of people who had never been used to being attacked or silenced before. And they were young, and they were online, and they were ready to coalesce around something. And I think that's what made it so magical or something.
You know, gamers have actually long been the demon in the bedroom for like the American Christians in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was, I mean, Hillary Clinton and Joe Lieberman actually brought legislation to try and sort of censor video games. So this is another reason I would never vote for Hillary. I mean, I don't think anyone ever should. She's a corporate shill. Don't vote for Hillary. Yeah. But there are so many reasons not to, basically.
We can get into that too, yeah.
Yeah. Gamers are actually quite familiar with being attacked politically because of their hobby, even though there hasn't been a single study that's ever really conclusively proven anything about video games. In fact, there are dozens that say, well, there's no connection between video games and anything. You know, and if you look at the statistics, the rise of video games has coincided with the descent of violence. So, I mean, I'm not saying they're connected, but it's one of those things that there is literally nothing to show that video games are doing anything wrong. In fact, there's quite a lot to show they're doing a lot of things right.
Yeah, well, I remember that. I think maybe it was around 91 or 92 when Joe Lieberman was leading that fight against video games. I think it was because of Mortal Kombat. I was playing it on Sega Genesis at the time, and I would come home from school and play that for hours with my friends. I never ripped anyone's skull out with their spine attached to it, you know what I mean?
Not once.
Not once. No, I tried once, but I never successfully did it. So that says something. Actually, I think you can prove that it probably helps people in a more healthy way vent some of their anger and frustration, don't you think?
I think they're multiplayer games, aren't they? You know, they get groups of guys to hang out and do something that's not dangerous or violent. You know, and think about it. I mean, when I was a kid, if we weren't playing video games, we were on the streets causing trouble. You know,
right.
It was better for us to be at home playing video games than to not be playing video games. So I honestly can't see where the objections come from. You know, but it's the same with anything like Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s or music in the 70s. You know, video games in the 90s and the 2000s. There is always something that the pearl clutching moral majority, or so they would like to position themselves as, has got to rail against something. And ironically, that was always the religious right. You know, that was always the highly religious authoritarian right. Now it is the highly regressive authoritarian left.
Yeah, and this is the horseshoe theory that we talk about all the time, that the extremes on both sides come together. All right, so last thought on Gamergate. You know, the other thing that I think is really nice about the community is that people who are gamers, it doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what sex or sexuality, any of the little dividing boxes that the left wants to put us in. It doesn't matter what you are, and that's why the community's so strong. So then when these people that are writing these articles say, well, gamers are sexist or gamers are racist, it literally has no meaning because it's as diverse a community as you could possibly put out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, you literally can't tell by playing a video game what race or gender the people you're playing with are, because everyone gets to choose their own avatar, they get to customize their name. You know, the only way you'd know is by voice chat, you know, and so for the vast majority of people, playing video games is not tied to identity politics. And what's interesting is the regressive academics actually they spent a lot of time sort of planning their assault on video games. And they spent a lot of time doing research. And there was a feminist academic called Adrienne Shaw, who did a series of studies, not based on particularly large sample sizes, but large enough, I would say, to at least give you the impression that they're going in the wrong direction, because her conclusions, and she was someone looking for a way to sort of, crack open the video game industry with a good reason to attack it. She found that basically video games didn't need diversity. Video games had diversity, which meant that and that in itself, where does a regressive begin their plan of attack? If the thing that they're attacking is already diverse, and so basically it led to her reframing the study she had already conducted in a different way. And the language is very opaque, but basically she was not happy that there was a plurality of markets. And now I personally think a plurality of markets is a wonderful thing. I think that if you want video games about, I don't know, Japanese hentai, great, that's your business. I'm not interested in that. I want video games about killing dinosaurs. That's great. That's my niche.
Yeah.
Everyone gets their own niche. Whereas the problem that they had is that they wanted a hegemony over that. They didn't want a plurality of markets, because then you could have diverse markets. You could have markets that aren't diverse. They wanted every market to be controlled effectively by their ideology. Thankfully, it's not going to happen.
Right. So just to be clear about that, so there are people that are probably playing Mario Kart that have nothing to do with the people that are playing the games you're playing. So it doesn't make sense even to lump all those people together.
Absolutely. There will obviously be some crossover in every game genre, but by and large, you get people who have different preferences and they play different things. It's like one of the things they were saying, one of the things the big stat they pull out is like, almost half of people playing video games are women. It's okay, great. But what are they playing? They're not playing Call of Duty. They're not sat there on their Xboxes with their headphones in, running around calling each other gay. They're playing Candy Crush and Farmville, and which are all perfectly valid forms of entertainment, and more power to them. I want them to play the games they want to play. But by this fact, it doesn't justify changing anything about the games I play because of the games they play, and vice versa is true. I don't want their games being changed to suit me either. That would be the last thing I would want to impose on them. And so this is basically one of the things the regressive left will always do, is use statistics in the most slippery way possible. Lies, damn lies, and statistics really does apply here. Mm-hmm. They will use statistics to justify anything. So be careful about the use of statistics with the regressive left.